Fate's Warning with Theories of Flight. How's it going, everybody? coverkillernation here. Time for us to talk about this album. It's highly anticipated in the progressive music community, the progressive metal community. Fate's Warning is a group that has 30 years, really, plus on their record and a number of studio albums, this being number 11 of their career, and it's certainly one that does harken back to some of those days of old. Yeah, I'm going to tell you that right out of the gate, principally because it does have a bit of that register a little bit in some locations, while also maintaining some of the Fate's Warning staples. So if you're a fan of albums of theirs such as Disconnect, this is one that's going to have a markedly heavier feel to it. And you don't get that right away, though. You don't get that initially from the Rooftops, the very first song that you get off of this disc, which is nearly 7 minutes of an opener. It's one that is able to really captivate you through a little bit of its pacing, which is kind of expertly handled. It slows itself during its open and slowly builds to where it's trying to go, kind of giving you that perspective of being up on the rooftops. And there are some things that cause me to believe that there's a bit of a mini concept here for this disc, or it's one that has some themology to it, a little bit of maybe some space travel, or really just some departure from home, or returning home afterward. There's a lot of different things that sort of suggest that a little bit. Something is definitely sort of linking some of these thought processes together in some way, shape, or form, which is really, really cool. But 7 Stars, the second track off of this album, is a bona fide classic. This is one that has a lot of the marks of that old school Fate's Warning sound that you hear from the 1980s off of, you know, their earliest albums. And it's because it has this like really heavy exterior to it. You know, you listen to these guitars and you almost think that they're taking some heaviness lessons from a band of the age such as Symphony X, or maybe even some Dream Theater. But either way, this is one that kind of veers and steers a little bit more toward just traditional heavy metal power, as opposed to staying rooted within the progressive metal community. This isn't one that has a lot of odd twists and turns to it. This is a very directed, in-your-face track. It does feature soaring vocals, so it almost can even have a bit of a power metal-y register to it, but it's one that works. It's extremely effective. It's a hell of a track to really come to after a terrific opener such as From the Rooftops. It kind of elevates it one step further, launching into SOS, which continues a little bit of that same overall, you know, musical philosophy. But whenever you get into the light and shade of things, you encounter the first of 2 tracks that are over 10 minutes in length. Now, both of these are just within the 10 1/4 or 10 1/2 minute register, so they're not elongated epics to the point where you're talking 15 or 16 minutes. Once again, making a reference to, say, Disconnected, either that or, you know, the Ivory Gate of Dreams, which is over 20 minutes in length. But this is a track that uses that time, and it's one of Fate's Warning's real staples to just sort of take things slow and still provide a little bit of power. They don't abandon the power on this epic. It's one that does make an appearance about 40% of the way through, and certainly delivers one of the keynote aspects of this track. It gives it a little sense of balance, and whenever you combine that balance with just an overall fairly decent sense of songwriting, which I feel Fate's Warning was really on, they were just on their game whenever they went into the studio with this disc, because nothing about the songwriting on this album feels like it's very weak. Nothing feels derivative. It all has, you know, a little bit of charm within Fate's Warning's own sound, but also feels like they are combining some of their overall influences throughout their career in order to really captivate and give a disc that sort of delivers on a more wide-scale basis. And I like the fact that this song really does that. It harkens back to some of the Dream Theater epics that perhaps you hear that have a bit of a softer introduction, you know, a little bit more of an idea that, you know, builds until it explodes. White Flag is the very next track, and once again, the return to power. In fact, this is something that's becoming extremely commonplace on this disc, and it's definitely a hell of a nice addition. The next track that you really will notice something is the second epic. You know, I don't want to sell short like Stars Our Eyes Have Seen. I like the lyrical content a lot on that track. I feel that it's very well scripted and handled. But The Ghosts of Home is one that is setting up with the finale, which is the self-titled track, Theories of Flight, this whole concept of of maybe returning home, or there's, you know, memories of home, and this whole concept of ghosts within that construct has a lot of real power to it, and especially whenever you combine this track with the title track, considering it's a 4-minute instrumental that has some spoken word stuff about leaving home, or about, you know, the place where you grew up. It's a neat little combined effort there, almost as though they're meant to be linked, and part of me feels like perhaps they're supposed to be. But I like how the Ghosts of Home, I almost said the Ghosts of Horn, what's that? But at any rate, I dig the fact that this track really gives you a lot of Rush vibe to it, a lot of, you know, little twinges and turns, a little ideas that you hear perhaps on songs such as Limelight from Rush, that are spattered within this, and then just even the overall body and construction almost sounds like Rush being updated about, say, 30 years, and having a little bit of a balanced exterior to it. So there's a little bit of heaviness that sort of also couples with that sort of softer mid-range that gives it an overall sort of balanced approach, as opposed to feeling a bit janky or a bit dedicated, or overly dedicated, should I say, to just one. Overall, the way in which this album was written was quite good, and I know that this is the second time mentioning it, but it's worth that mention. However, this is also a disc that's like a couple that we spoke about in the 5 recently released albums episode from 2 days ago. This is one where you want the deluxe edition, because it does come with some pretty cool stuff, including an acoustic version of 7 Stars, as an acoustic version of one of their past songs, Another Perfect Day, and then also 3 covers that are done acoustically. Pray Your Gods, which is a Toad the Wet Sprocket song, which is pretty awesome that they dug into the Toad the Wet Sprocket catalog for that one. If you don't know the band, they're an alternative group. Check them out. They're actually well worth it. They also do a Joaquin Rodrigo cover. It's the song called Adela. And also Rain by Uriah Heep, which is really, really nicely done. All 3 of these are well executed. You know, there's going to be some out there that feel like they would want to hear these tracks with the fullness of, you know, the power of the electric guitar, and perhaps a little bit more of a less reverent approach, something that has more motion, more kinesis. But really, for this sort of intimacy that they provide with these covers, it's pretty well executed, and it's one that leaves you feeling pretty good about all 3. You're not tempted to turn these off during any point in time. They're tracks that in and of themselves have a lot of power behind them, but then Fate's sort of stripping them down a little bit gives it a little bit more oomph. It kind of gives it that intimate candlelight room setting, almost as though these were meant to be for, say, an acoustic unplugged show or something like that. You know, remember MTV Unplugged? Imagine Fate's Warning on MTV Unplugged. It's kind of a ridiculous thought, but these 3 tracks actually proved that if they were, they'd pull it off. This is a terrific disc. I had some people telling me prior to this review that there was not going to be any disappointment. God damn, did they not lie to me, because this was definitely the experience that I think a lot of Fate's Warning fans were sort of clamoring for a while. Some of their most recent affairs have been pretty decent, but they haven't put together, I think, a complete album like this in quite some time. Probably not since the 1990s, although Disconnected is one of those albums that you can easily sort of get lost into it, and it can become one of your favorites without you even realizing it. It's one that you kind of constantly go back to and harken back to. There's a number of albums that sort of have that status to them. But this is one that's a 91 out of 100. It's really difficult to put down. It's almost impossible to let go. And really, 7 Stars has been a track that's been in my mind ever since the first time I listened to this album a couple of days ago. So there's a lot of that memory. You have a long memory with this album, and that suits it and serves it well. But I want to know what you guys think about Theories of Flight by Fate's Warning. Let me know in the comments below. Are you excited about this? Have you heard this and do you love it? Or do you think it's not that good? Let me know. I'm Cover Killer Nation, and I'll talk to each and every one of you guys next time. Take care.